Early life and military beginnings. Zachary Taylor was born on November 24, 1784, in the rolling hills of Virginia, the son of a wealthy planter, Richard Taylor. His family was part of the emerging American elite, yet the country was still in its infancy, struggling to find its footing. In a young nation, this birth in Virginia foreshadowed nothing extraordinary. But it would become clear that this quiet beginning would not define him. From an early age, Zachary was immersed in the contradictions of American society. Though born into a privileged family, his education was minimal. His schooling was scattered and inconsistent. He never attended college, yet this lack of formal education didn't seem to hinder his growth. Instead, it shaped a man who would rely on instincts, wisdom drawn from experience, and a relentless drive. Unlike other young men of his social standing, who were trained for politics or law, Zachary was drawn to the life of a soldier, a calling that beckoned him with the promise of adventure and honor. At 24, in 1808, Taylor left the comfort of home for the uncertainty of the military. He enlisted as a first lieutenant in the U.S. Army, stepping into the world of men who fought to define the very soul of the nation. He was not driven by ambition for fame, nor the hunger for power. Instead, he was motivated by duty, a sense of purpose that for him would eclipse any personal desires. Early in his career, Taylor faced the same struggles as most young officers, proving his worth, gaining respect, and finding his voice in an institution that valued discipline above all. He served in various posts across the frontier, fighting in skirmishes with Native American tribes, whose lands the United States was determined to expand. These experiences shaped his character. Zachary's peers saw him as calm, steadfast, and unfailingly fair. He wasn't the brash or fiery officer often admired in the military. Instead, he commanded respect with his quiet authority and unshakable resolve. His first significant test came during the War of 1812, where he served with distinction in the Battle of Fort Harrison. Despite being outnumbered and under-equipped, Taylor's leadership was pivotal in holding the fort against a larger British force. His men, gripped by fear, found confidence in his unwavering resolve. That moment would mark the beginning of his ascent, but it was the Mexican-American War that would truly define him as a leader. By the time the Mexican-American War began in 1846, Taylor had spent nearly 4 decades honing his military expertise. He was already a seasoned officer, well respected by his peers, but few could have predicted that he would become the symbol of American military might. As he prepared to lead troops into what would become his most consequential campaign, the stage was set for a man who had always done his duty in silence to step into the spotlight. This was just the beginning of a journey that would propel him from the obscurity of military service to the heights of national fame. But as we'll see, the real conflict had not yet begun. Taylor's greatest challenge was still ahead, one that would not be fought on the battlefield, but in the realm of politics, a world he was about to enter with the same steady hand he had shown in combat. Military leadership and the Mexican-American War. By the time the Mexican-American War ignited in 1846, Zachary Taylor had spent nearly 4 decades honing his military skills. Yet, when the call came to defend the United States against Mexican forces, Taylor's role was anything but guaranteed. The nation, divided and tense over issues of territory and slavery, needed a leader, someone with a steady hand to guide its soldiers through perilous conflict. Taylor, a veteran of the frontier, found himself thrust into the role of national hero almost by accident. But his leadership would soon define him as the figurehead of American resilience. The war began with a clash of Mexican and American forces in disputed territory, with Taylor sent to Texas to oversee the defense of American interests. His first major battle, the Battle of Palo Alto in May 1846, would forever alter the course of his life. Outnumbered and facing a well-prepared Mexican army, Taylor's troops seemed doomed from the start. Yet, It was in the face of overwhelming odds that Taylor's character began to shine. With calm precision, he ordered his artillery to unleash a storm of fire, using the terrain to his advantage. His tactics were unconventional, sparing his forces while relentlessly chipping away at the enemy. But they worked. His victory, against all expectations, catapulted him to national fame. But it was not just his military skill that set Taylor apart. It was his ability to inspire. His soldiers adored him. They had seen many commanders, but Taylor's steady presence made him different. He wasn't a distant, cold general barking orders from afar. He was one of them. He led by example, enduring the hardships of war alongside his men. His humility in the face of victory was unmatched. His ability to remain calm under pressure became the hallmark of his leadership. His nickname, Old Rough and Ready, became synonymous with his no-nonsense, resilient style. As the war progressed, Taylor's prominence grew. The Battle of Buena Vista in February 1847 would solidify his place in American history. Once again, he was up against an overwhelming force, with over 20,000 Mexican troops arrayed against his 5,000 men. Yet, Taylor's leadership was not one of rashness. In the midst of a tense standoff, he devised a strategy that kept his forces together and, in many cases, allowed them to overpower the Mexican troops. His personal bravery during the battle, where he remained in the thick of the fighting despite grave danger, was widely admired. The victory at Buena Vista was decisive, and Taylor's fame reached new heights. But his success was more than just military. It was symbolic. In a nation deeply fractured by issues of slavery and expansion, Taylor's victories presented a unifying force. The public saw him as a man of principle, someone who did not speak in riddles or hide behind political jargon. He was a soldier who fought and led with his heart, and that authenticity resonated with the American people. But as the dust settled from the battlefields, Taylor's true test loomed closer: the political arena. Though the war was far from over, Taylor's growing popularity had already ignited whispers of his potential candidacy. He had become a symbol of American strength. Yet the real question now was whether the humble soldier could navigate the complex world of politics. His military victories had made him a household name, but as Taylor would soon learn, war and politics were two vastly different arenas. The battle for the White House was about to begin, and it would require more than military victories. It would demand a level of political savvy he had never needed before. Political rise and presidency. In the aftermath of his military triumphs, Zachary Taylor found himself standing on the precipice of a new and uncharted frontier: the world of politics. A seasoned military hero, he had become the symbol of American strength and unity, admired not just for his victories in the Mexican-American War, but for his personal integrity and steadfast leadership. Yet, despite his lack of political experience, the American public saw him as a man of the people, someone who, much like the nation itself, had emerged from humble origins to become a leader in a time of great turbulence. His military career had made him a national icon, and now, as whispers of a presidential run grew louder, Taylor was about to face a challenge unlike any he had encountered before. In 1848, Taylor was drafted by the Whig Party to run for president. The decision to nominate him was a gamble, but it was one that spoke to the era's growing need for a leader who could unite a fractured nation. The political landscape was divided, not just over the results of the Mexican-American War, but over the pressing issue of slavery. The question of whether new territories acquired through the war should allow slavery had ignited fierce debates across the country. The Whigs saw in Taylor an outsider, a man who had no ties to the contentious political machines of Washington, D.C., and more importantly, a man whose military success had earned him the trust of the people. However, Taylor's entry into the political fray was not without complications. He had no political platform, no detailed plan for how to address the country's internal divisions. He was a man of few words, and in an age where eloquence and rhetoric were paramount, this silence was both a blessing and a curse. Taylor's campaign relied largely on his status as a military hero and the simple, relatable image of a man who had fought for his country. Not a polished politician, but a man who had lived through struggle and earned his place through deeds, not speeches. This authenticity resonated with voters across the country, especially in the wake of a growing sense of dissatisfaction with the political establishment. On the campaign trail, Taylor's personality shone through. He was not one for grand speeches or calculated promises. His speeches were direct and unscripted, and while his opponents criticized his lack of political acumen, many saw it as a refreshing break from the usual political posturing. Taylor, the soldier, the old rough and ready, promised only one thing. He would govern with the same honesty, fortitude, and decisiveness that had made him a hero in the battlefield. And for many, that was enough. The election of 1848 was a hard-fought contest, but Taylor emerged victorious. The Whigs had succeeded in rallying enough support for their unlikely candidate, and on March 4, 1849, Taylor was inaugurated as the 12th President of the United States. However, as he stood at the podium, with the weight of the presidency now squarely on his shoulders, it became clear that the real challenges were only just beginning. The nation was teetering on the edge of crisis, and Taylor would soon find that the battle for the presidency was far different from the battlefields of Mexico. His popularity was undeniable, but the questions of slavery, state rights, and national unity would test his resolve in ways he had never imagined. As president, Taylor would have to navigate the treacherous waters of American politics, where the stakes were far higher than any military campaign. Legacy and death. Zachary Taylor's presidency, though brief, was filled with weighty decisions that would echo through America.